So back to the start. We are going to be building out the Supabase backend that powers this Matterday project by Netlify. And so the idea uh, of this project is that if you use Netlify, you get back an additional day a week by not having to manage the infrastructure of your project. And not needing to handle things like deploys and managing servers and things like that. And so by using Netlify, you get back a day a week. And so what would you do with that extra day that you now have back? And so this landing page is a really, really nicely designed. It's a beautiful parallax scrolling, uh, beautiful website built by Lynn Fisher from Netlify. And so if you want to check out how that was built, if you head over to the Netlify blog, there is she has done this awesome write-up about fun CSS-only scrolling effects for Matterday. So basically building out the UI for that landing page. So yeah, I recommend you go and check that out. I'll make sure there's a link to that in the description once I finish this stream and maybe edit out the whole first section where I was talking completely muted. And now that I open up the chat, I can see that lots and lots of people are telling me that I have no audio. So yeah, well, at least people are watching. That's good. Where are you coming to us from in the chat if you haven't bailed on the stream by watching me talk muted for like 15, 20 minutes? Yeah, let us know. But yeah, I recommend you check out this blog, this write-up by Lynn Fisher to learn how she put together this awesome UI. So yeah, what we're going to build in this stream, or what I started to build in this stream by myself, was this little form at the bottom here. So if this is the first time you've been to this page, if you log out, you'll see that you need to sign in to be able to enter in what you would do with your extra day. And so if I log in with GitHub, this is using Supabase to authenticate with GitHub. And then once GitHub tells Supabase everything is all good, we are back on this page where we can enter in what we would like to do with our extra day. And so the example that I used before was to go skateboarding, which is probably still in here maybe. What about this one? Possibly. Oh yeah, awesome. So we have this go skateboarding matter that has been created by us entering in the data into that form. And so this automatically creates this OG image or this shareable image that we can then tweet. So I stepped through this before, but I probably don't want to tweet it again. But if you go to my Twitter, you can see that I tweeted this one. And so, yeah, it generates this nice shareable icon, and you'll see that the skateboard has been removed from the shareable image, and we'll look at at why that is later, or how we did that, because otherwise it will break sending that information to the Cloudinary API. So cool. So if I go back, so we can also check out what other people would do with their extra days. So we can see that lots of people would probably catch up on projects, finish that project. Lots of people said work on a side project. It's it's a little bit worrying that what software developers would do with their extra day is more software development. But yeah, so we're going to look at building out this UI today. Or sorry, not building out the UI, building out the Supabase backend that powers this UI, and see how far we get. Because before we had maybe 2 hours, but now we have even less because of the technical difficulties. So yeah, I also wrote a blog about how I built this backend. So if we don't get through this entire stream, if we don't get everything implemented, there are some nice copy and pastable chunks of code in this article that I put out, and I'll again make sure that there's a link to that in the description. Cool. So this is the Matterday project. If you're just joining us, I already cloned this down while muted and completely silently on your side. But this is a Next.js application that is just a public GitHub repo. you can go and check it out and see how we built it. And so I've cloned down this project and then opened it up in, or I did git clone, brought that down, and then I've installed the npm packages and opened it up in VS Code. And so I was just going through how we actually implemented this. So starting from the landing page, we have this nice landing page component that is being rendered. And so the way that we chose to do this across working across different companies and also different departments, me working on building out the Supabase backend and doing all of the kind of authentication and making sure that the data is fed through correctly into the right components, and then Lynn taking that and making them actually look nice. I decided the best naming convention for this was name all the components that Lynn was going to touch as nice something. And so in our components folder, we have nice landing page, nice Matterform, all these different nice components. And these are the ones that Lynn made look very beautiful. So if we look at the nice landing page, we can see that this has lots and lots of wonderful styling. And so this is all the content that you see on that landing page. And then down the bottom here, somewhere we have a form. And so if we have a look at what that actually is, it's a dynamic import using Next Dynamic. And so this allows you to import components lazily. And in this case, we want to import them only on the client. So we want to turn off SSR. And so this is because we're doing all of our authentication and all of our data fetching logic client side. And so, yeah, in order to not have a mismatch between the server and the client as to whether the user is currently signed in, we can import this lazily and set SSR to false. And so this is bringing in our form component here. This is using a user from use user, which is coming in from context. So if I have a look at this one, this is just basically a global user. And so we have a user, we're running use effect on mount, and then we're setting our user to be supabase.auth.user, so whatever the state of our user currently is. So that'll be either undefined or our actual user from Supabase. And then anytime their auth state changes, so anytime the user signs in or signs out, we get the new user state from Supabase, and then we set the user to be our new user. And so, yeah, just basically gives us a global user state object that we can use throughout our application to determine whether the user is signed in or not. And so that's exactly what we're doing here. We're checking whether the user is signed in. If they are, then we're rendering out the nice Matterform. Otherwise, we're rendering out the nice sign-in form. So if we have a look at the nice sign-in form, this just basically says, well, you need to log in with GitHub if you'd like to do this, and gives you a button to click to handle signing in. And so then this is how we sign in with Supabase. It's very, very simple. And then all of the magic happens behind the scenes to share that, or for Supabase to know about the state of our user and whether they're signed in or not and who they are. And so, yeah, we can do that with using third-party providers by passing in provider and then GitHub. So this is automatically going to go off to GitHub and authenticate with an OAuth app there. But we need to actually create that on our GitHub account so that we can tell Supabase which OAuth app this belongs to on GitHub side. And then we can use that for authentication. And so that's what I was stepping through here. So I went over to GitHub and went to settings, applications, and then new OAuth app. And so here I was just starting to create the OAuth application. So it's called Matterday run through. The homepage is going to be the URL of your Supabase project. And so that's this URL here. So this will be on the landing page as we're creating a new Supabase project. Or if you want to access it later, you go to settings and then API. And then, yeah, you've got your anon key and your URL at the top. So we're going to copy this URL. We're going to put it into our OAuth app here. And then our authorization callback is just going to be that value /auth/v1/callback. And so this is just a URL that Supabase manages for us, and that's just going to take that callback from GitHub, where the user is signing in and do all the token exchangey stuff, and then redirect back to our application. Cool. So I'm going to register my application. This is going to give us a client ID, which we're going to put into Supabase. So if we come back under settings, under settings and then authentication, we can scroll down to GitHub. That's GitLab, GitHub. And then we just need to input the client ID and the client secret. So that's our ID. And then hopefully no one does anything awful with this. You wouldn't do that, right? Not after all my technical problems. All right, we'll copy that. We'll put it into Supabase. And then, cool. And then we just need to save our external OAuth providers. And that's it. Now we have a OAuth app with GitHub that can allow our users to sign in and sign out. We've told Supabase about that. And so now in our code, we can just do this. So we can say supabase.auth.signin and then tell it we're signing in with the provider GitHub. This will probably break if I try and run it. Oh, the other thing I did while I was muted was I came over to this file where we have our Supabase client. This is where it's creating a client and it's using these environment variables, which we didn't have specified yet. So I've created a .env.local file and created the next _public_Supabase URL, which again is coming from settings and then API. So I've copied this URL and then the anon key is this one here. So if we put those both into a .env.local with these names, then everything will be wired up correctly and we'll be able to actually create an instance of our Supabase client. So let's see how much of this will work now, because we should now be able to detect that the user is not signed in, and we should prompt them to be able to sign in. But then when we try to load the form, no, actually the form should still work as well. All right, let's see. So let's go over to localhost over port 3000. Awesome, and we see this beautiful landing page. And if we scroll down to the bottom, we see that we're not signed in. So we can click this link to log in with GitHub. And that goes off to GitHub and uses our OAuth application that we just created to authenticate. And then we get an error, router.push/share, cancel rendering route. Cool. Not sure. All right. Yep. No, sign up button is null. So I think this is maybe failing because we need to start implementing our actual logic. So when we have, if we come back to our form, so now that we have signed in, so all of this stuff has happened, we clicked the handle sign in button, that's gone off and authenticated with GitHub, and then it's rerouted us back to the landing page, which has checked with that form, is our user now signed in, which they are, and so we're rendering the nice Matter form. So if we have a look at the nice Matter form, this one has basically an input, and then that's inside a form. And when we submit our form, it's going to go off to Supabase and say from the matters table, which we need to create, we want to insert this content. And then this doesn't actually need to happen on client side anymore. We're going to do this on the server in Supabase during this stream. So remember that I said this, we'll come back to this, but we don't actually need this one anymore. So all we're going to be doing is passing through the content of whatever the user wrote into that form. We're sending that across to Supabase to write to the matters table. So this is going to insert a new row into the matters table for that content. And so I guess we need a table. So let's go over to Supabase and go to the table editor. We're going to create a new table. This one's going to be called matters. And actually, before I do this, one of the fields is going to be an enum. So we're going to have status, which is going to be an enum, which means that it can only be a finite number of possible values. And we don't have a way to create that through the UI right now. So if we want to create an enum column, we need to do that first. So we come over to our SQL editor here. We create a new query. and we're going to create a new type. So this is how you create an enum. So the name of our enum or our new type is going to be status options. And then we want to create this as an enum, which then we need to just provide those that finite collection of values that this column could be set to. So we're going to say new and approved and denied. And so the reason that we need denied, the reason that we need this status column is that we're giving people an unrestricted input to enter in anything that they want. And so, yeah, we wanted to have a moderation step where to build up our grid of matters, so to build up this page, we basically only wanted things to appear here that had been moderated by the Netlify team. And so, yeah, so we want to have a status, a status column where anything that's new doesn't appear on that grid, and then our moderators have an opportunity to either approve or deny it. And so only approved matters will appear in that grid. Cool. So if we run this SQL statement here, it's going to create a new status options type, which is an enum. And now if we come back to create our new table and we call it matters, we are going to enable row level security. So this is going to blanket deny all actions by default. So we won't be able to select, insert, update, or delete. And then if we want to enable those actions, then we just need to write a policy. But we'll look at that in a second. Oh, this enable real time thing. That's new. That's a very good tick box. That's a good idea. But we won't look at doing that just yet. We'll come down to our columns. And now if we were to create a status column, you'll see that when we select our type here, that status options type is now here under user defined enumerated types. So we can select status options, and then we could set the default value for this to be new. And so that's going to be our three options were new, approved, and denied. So anytime we're creating a new matter, it'll automatically go into the status of new. So this is one that hasn't been moderated yet. I'm going to make this not nullable because we don't want the status to ever not be there. We always want it to either be one of those three statuses. And created at we can also say is not nullable because this has a default value, so it would never be null. Cool. And then we want an actual column for our content. And so this one is going to be text. So this is going to be what the user would actually do with their extra day. And it won't have a default value, but we also want this to not be nullable because there's no point in creating a row in this table if there's no content. Content is the only thing that the user is giving us. So we need to have content to be able to create a row. What else do we need? We need an OG image. So this is going to be that shareable OG image that we generate. And that's going to be text because it will be a URL of where to get that image from Cloudinary. We will leave this as nullable just because it will be nullable initially, and then we'll be generating that OG image and writing it automatically. So the user won't have to do anything there. We will just take care of that functionality for them. So initially it will be null, and then we'll write that value once we've generated the OG image. And then the last thing we need is a user ID, which is going to be the user that created this matter. So if we click this little linky thing here, we can link this to our auth.users table. So this is a special table that is managed by Supabase and has all of our user data in it. And then we want to link it to the ID column of auth.users. So I'll click save. This is going to create that relationship, that foreign key relationship between this matters table and our auth.users table. And then I think that's everything that we would need. This one would also, we wouldn't ever want this one to be nullable either, because we always want there to be a user associated with each of our matters. Cool. So now if we click save, that's going to create that table. Cool. And cool. Now we have a table. And so what this line of code is doing over here, so from the matters table, we want to insert into the content column whatever is written in the input. We are basically just inserting a new row where the content is, let's say, hello or whatever it is. And then this is automatically going to go into the new status. We want to actually write our user's ID by default. Yeah, by default, we can set this value to whoever the user is that's trying to perform this action, or whoever is inserting a new row into this table. So we can do that. I should have done that when we were creating the table, but hopefully we can just edit the table and come down here and we can set a default value. And so the value that we want to set this to is auth.uid, which is a special function that we get from Supabase, which basically pipes through the JWT for who the user is that's trying to insert into this table. And then we can write that value directly to this column. So we don't need to like pass anything through from the front end because we're using Supabase for our database and we're also using Supabase for our auth. Supabase is smart enough to kind of know how all of these pieces work together and is sort of smart enough to know who our user is that's trying to perform that action. And so we can set up in our database, just grab the user who's trying to do this action, and they can be the creator of this matter. So now if we save this, hopefully that's all good. Cool. And so we don't actually have, oh no, we would have a user who's signed in now. So this user here is the user that I signed in when I clicked the button and then got that big error here, this lovely error. And so, yeah, we could insert a new row into our table. Not a new table, a new row into our table. And we could set the user ID to be that user. Now, if we click view data, we can go and look and see that that is the correct user that we created. And now we could say we want the content to be just testing. And that should be the only field that we need to set. And then if we save, this is automatically going to go into the new status. We haven't generated the OG image yet, so we'll look at doing that soon. And we've got our user ID, which was the user that's associated with this this matter. Cool. So we should technically be able to do this now. Actually, no, sorry, that's something that I was just talking about that I haven't actually implemented. Was we can create rows from the Supabase dashboard because that is basically has elevated privileges and bypasses row level security, which was that thing that we turned on the table. But if we try to do this from a client application, it's going to fail because we have RLS enabled, but we haven't written a policy. So RLS, as I said before, just denies all actions by default. So we won't be able to insert, update, delete, or select anything from this table. And so we need to create policies to be able to do that. And so I'm going to create a select policy. So I want basically anyone to be able to read any of the rows. So anyone can read matters. And I'm just going to return true. So the user doesn't need to be signed in. They don't need to, they don't need to be anything. Anyone can see any of the data in this table. And I'm going to save that policy. And then I'm going to create a new policy for insert. So this one's going to be a little bit more complicated, that it needs to be authenticated users. So authenticated users can insert their own matter. And so this is going to firstly enforce that the role is authenticated. So this means that the user is currently signed in. And then by saying insert their own matter, this means only insert a matter where the user ID column is set to their user ID. So you can't insert a matter for someone else. Yeah, hopefully that makes sense. So we want to say, because this runs on every single row, we can inspect particular columns. So we can say user underscore ID. So this is the column in of the row that's currently being inserted. We want to check that that is equal to auth.uid. So they'll only be able to insert a new row if the user ID column is set to the current user um, who's trying to write this new row. Cool. I'm just trying to get to that button. Cool. And then we can save this policy. So now we should be able to insert as an authenticated user, and we should be able to select matters that are in there. Let's see if that's fixed this. Saying sign up button is null. What is our sign up button? Let's open up this one and look for sign up. Sign this sign up button. Okay. Apparently that doesn't exist anywhere in our project. Interesting. Okay. Cool. So shouldn't our sign up button be down here? So we have a button to submit this form. And what does it say in our trusty console? Can't get to our console. Oof, I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so we can actually see this. Cancel rendering root. This is null. What if we get rid of this bit? Null. Woof. All right. It's a very interesting error. Injected script. This maybe this is coming in from something that is there for like analytics or something. Maybe something like this that's trying to select something. So yeah, maybe we'll just get rid of this. And yeah, let's see if that's magically fixed it. That looks like it has actually magically fixed it. Okay, so there must be something that's looking for something that exists on the actual deployed version of this application that we don't have here. Cool. So now I should be able to say, is this working? And submit. And we get an error here, which is totally fine. That's expected. But what we wanted to do is check that this is actually inserted in. So it has. We've got, is this working? Inserted into our Supabase database. So that part was working. And if we come across here, it's automatically inserted our user ID. And it's automatically set this to the status of new. Cool. So everything is working so far. So what we want to do is basically generate this OG image. Now, this ended up being super complicated, way more complicated than I thought it would be initially. The reason we're using Cloudinary is because they do like on the fly transformations really, really well, dealing with images, videos, anything. They, are just, the go to people for that. But the other part is that they really heavily cache any of those values that are generated. So basically, the first time we request this image, it's going to be generated on the fly. And then anytime after that, it's going to be it's just going to be a cached value, so it doesn't need to do any of that work. So to show you what I'm actually talking about, if I come to here, actually, if I go back to this one, so you remember when I shared this on Twitter, it showed this nicely generated version of this image. So if I have a look at in the head here, we have a OG image, OG URL. No, OG. Not that one. Oh yeah, this long one. This crazy one. So this is what we're going to generate. This huge URL. So you'll see this is going off to Cloudinary. It's using the Netlify account. So there's an OG image, like a template that exists in Netlify, in their account on Cloudinary. And we're basically telling it all of this information. So this is the up to here is information about the overall card. So like how big is this image? So it's 1280 by 669, and yeah, there's probably not worth going through all of this, but this is related to where like how the overall template looks. We're then doing an lfetch with this crazy value here. So lfetch is what is fetching this image to overlay over the top. So this is going off to GitHub and getting that avatar from an avatar URL on GitHub. So lfetch basically means go and make a HTTP request to another website and then get back whatever that is and overlay that as over this image. So this is a base 64 version of my GitHub avatar URL, which we'll look at implementing soon. And then we have where do we actually want to place that layer? Or we want it to be width 65, height 65. We want to add that layer over the top at x48 and y45. So that's x48 from here and y45 going down from the top. So that places this icon here. We then want to place some text over our image. We want it to be 26, the size of the font to be 26, and we want it to be the Roboto font family. And then this is what we want to overlay that. So this is this bit. So we've got at Dijon Musters. So that's my GitHub username. So that's that layer. And then we want to, we have what color it's going to be, and then how far from X and Y it's going to be. We then add another layer, which is going to be the font family caveat. It's going to be 68. The font size is going to be 68 pixels. And this is that Go skateboarding, and then all of this crazy escaped character nonsense. So this is, what we'll look at now, because we'll need to do this to be able to build up our image. And then we have where we actually want that to be. So we want that to be Y 115, so pushed down to this point. So it's just sitting over that line. And then this is the actual file for the template. So I guess to show you the actual template, I think if we get rid of all of this, maybe up to the first bit of overlay that we put over it. Yeah, so this is our template image. So this is just what the OG image template looks like in Cloudinary. And then we overlay all of these different bits. So we overlay this by going and fetching that from the URL on GitHub. We go and get the GitHub username, and then we add the content of what they've entered into that input field. So yeah, there's lots and lots of stuff going on here. But if we have a look at this Go skateboarding thing, I was saying that this has these really big, ugly escaped characters. If we were to add anything that would break a URL, so like a dot, for example. Dot doesn't actually break it. Okay, what about a question mark? Question mark will definitely break it. Yeah, we get this beautiful error that tells us nothing from Cloudinary, which I was very used to seeing while I was building out this backend, because most of my time was just tweaking these URL parameters and then seeing what broke. And so, yeah, if we wanted to have a question mark character, like if we wanted this exclamation mark to be a question mark, we can do that, but we need to do it with an escaped URI encoded symbol. And so I'm assuming this is actually meant to be the URL, the URI encoded uh, emoji for a skateboard, which is not displaying there because that's not supported by Cloudinary's URL API. So we basically need to take the content, so go space skateboarding with an exclamation mark. We need to take that and turn it into an turn it into a URI encoded thing. So that's where we have like %20 instead of spaces and yeah, different percentage something values. But then we also need to escape them, which is this %25. Yeah, otherwise they will break the Cloudinary URL API. So let's look at first just taking that content string and then uh, making it URI encoded and then escaping those symbols. Which, if you remember, if I explained it when I actually had the when I had the mic actually working. In the original version of this, we were doing this work on the client and then just sending that across. So when they enter something into that input field, we're sending that across to set to the column for content. But then we had a second column, which is content underscore encoded. And we were doing this work on the front end. And the reason we were doing that is there's no simple way to do this in Postgres land. If we want to create a Postgres function, this is actually quite a complicated piece of logic to try and implement. So JavaScript is awesome at that. But then, since building this website, I've worked out an even cooler trick, which I did include in my blog about building out this this backend. That that Postgres you can install extensions. So if I come back to our Postgres instance here and I go to database and then extensions, there is an extension for V8, so PL V8. If we enable that, then we can now actually write Postgres functions using everything that's available to us in the V8 engine. So this is Chrome's JavaScript engine. So we could create a function that basically wraps these statements. So this escape and this encode URI component statement. We can write this logic in a Postgres function, but we can use JavaScript to do it. If that's not blowing your mind, it should be. It's very cool. It makes it gives you some very cool superpowers. So we're going to create a function, and that function actually, if I go show advanced settings, cool. All right. So this gives us the ability to write a PL V8 function. So we can say that the language that we want to use here is PL V8. And then what we actually want to do with this function is we want to take in, well, I guess we'll have a name. So this is going to be escape URI encode. So this is going to be the name of our function. So we want it to escape URI encode a particular string that we're giving it. So in that case, we need to pass in an argument. So this is going to be our content, which is going to be of type text. So we pass in our content, which is a big string, and then we want to get back a different string, which has that URI encoded stuff. And so the return type here is going to be text. And then the definition of our function, we're going to have a begin and an end. I guess all we want to actually do is just return what we were doing over here. So this, if I bring that in here, so we can now write JavaScript between this begin and end. So I want to escape encode URI component, and then rather than being matter, we just want this to be our content. So this is the content that we're passing into this function. And we just want to return that value. And then if we scroll down, we just want to make sure that we are setting this to the type of security to be security definer instead of security invoker. So security definer just means that basically it bypasses RLS. And security invoker means that it will run on behalf of whoever the user that triggered that action was. So we want it to be security definer because this is going to be happening server side. We're going to be generating this OG image all on the server. So yeah, security definer, confirm. And we now have this escape URI encode function. So if I come over to our SQL editor and I create a new query, I can say select encode, what was it, escape encode, URI encode, I think. And then I can pass this a big string. So let's say go skateboarding, and I could put a question mark here. And when I run this function, begin is not defined. Okay, so I might need to not, oh, of course, yeah, begin and end PGSQL syntax. Can I edit? Yes. Okay. So all I need to do is just remove this begin and end. I just return this JavaScript or V8 statement. Cool. So then back in our SQL editor, if I run this function, we get back this string. So go %2520 skateboarding %25 3F. So this looks like it's very similar to the value that that we had for in the URL that we were sending off to Cloudinary. So can I actually copy this value? And then we can see whether our question mark is actually working, because that would confirm that it's not broken. So if I say go skateboarding and we just replace this whole thing with the text that we got back from calling that function. So this is go space skateboarding and then a question mark. If I press enter, yes, we have a question mark. It's cut off weirdly, but that's fine. Cool. Okay, so yeah, so our function is working. So what we want to do now is we have a function to give us back a URI encoded version of our content. And so now we want to create a function where we can actually generate that whole OG image URL. And so yeah, this will look big and long and ugly, but we might just yeah, we can probably break it off into different lines so it doesn't look too bad. So if I create a new function, this is going to be generate OG image. The return type for this one is again going to be text because it's just going to be a big long string. We need a few arguments for this. We'll need well, if we think about what we need looking at this, we need the avatar URL, we need the GitHub username, and we need the actual content to be able to overlay this over this OG image. So let's say avatar URL, which is going to be type text, and then we want a GitHub username, which is going to be of type text. And then we need the content that we're going to be displaying, which is also of type text. And so, yeah, down here, we can leave this as PGSQL. And then we can write this as a Postgres function where we have a begin and an end. And then, yeah, I might just copy in this function and then talk about what it's doing instead of stepping through writing it all out. So yeah, we're just using concat to basically concat a collection of strings together. And the strings that we're putting together are that big cloudinary.com/netlify image, blah, 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 blah. And then the lfetch part. And then what do we actually want to go and fetch? Well, we want to fetch the avatar URL, which is what we're passing in up here. So this avatar URL, that's what we want to go and fetch. But remember, that was a big base 64 string. So if I come back in here, what lfetch is expecting is this big base 64 encoded version of the URL that you want to go and fetch from. So That's why we've wrapped that here in a call to encode. So encode is a separate function that exists in Postgres, where we can pass it a string that we want to encode and then how we want to encode it. So we want to base64 encode this one. So we're calling that function, passing in our avatar URL, and then we should get back a base64 version of that, which is what we're then passing to lfetch. We've then got the next chunk of stuff, which is basically the position of where we want that avatar URL to be. And then we want to overlay some more text. And the text that we want to overlay is the GitHub username, which is coming in from our arguments here. And then where we want that to be. And then we want to add another layer of text where we want to escape encode the URI. So we want to call our function that we just created, and we want to pass in content, which is the content that we got as an argument to this function. So basically just create that big long string, that big long avatar URL. The only thing we need to do is there was another problem here where avatar URL, when it's, so this is determined by GitHub when you actually create an account with GitHub, when you set your avatar URL, when you give it an image that you want to be your avatar. Depending on when you did that, you might have a query parameter for like $v equals 4. So basically version 4 of the avatar pictures. That breaks everything again. And so that's not something that existed on my avatar URL. But then when I deployed this and got some people to test it, I was getting these very strange, weird errors that things weren't, that same error that we saw before, where it gives you no information. And I eventually worked out that it was because the avatar URL had that question mark in it. So because it has those query parameters, it was breaking everything. So before we actually send this to encode, we want to remove that. So I wonder if I can do this without, well, I might just declare a new variable. So I'm going to say declare, and in here, we're going to have a safe avatar URL, which is going to be of type text. And then here I can say safe avatar URL can be set to, basically we want to use regexp replace. So we want to use a regular expression to replace a section of our text. The text that we want to replace is our avatar URL. And so this is our avatar URL that contains that question mark. And then what we want to do is pass it a regular expression for what we want to find within that string. So we want to find the question mark character. We need to do a / here to escape this question mark. And we basically want to select everything from there with any character after that all the way up to the end of the string. And we want to basically replace this with an empty string. And we want to do this. We don't actually need this flag, but we want to do this globally. So if there are any question marks, it'll remove it throughout the whole URL. So all this is saying is find the question mark character, take everything from that question mark character to the end of the string, and just replace it with an empty string. So essentially just remove everything from the question mark inclusive of the question mark. Cool. So we now have a safe avatar URL. So that's what we can pass through to our encode function here. And then that should be it. So now if we confirm that, and we can go and test that we can actually call this function. So if we create a new query here and we say select generate OG image, and then we needed to pass that a couple of things. So we needed to pass it a GitHub URI for our user. Actually, I can get that from, if we come across to our table editor and we have a look at our auth schema, we can go and have a look at auth.users, which is that special table that Supabase manages for us. And we can come across and look at all of the bits of information that Supabase stores about each of our users. And we can have a look at all of the stuff that we got passed across from GitHub when our user signed in. So this is all the OAuth information. So We get their name, we get their email, their full name. All of these are optional fields in GitHub, so we might not actually have these. They might be set to empty strings, but we have a username, so we'll be using that username later. Um, and we also have an avatar URL. So I wonder if I can. I can't get that, can I? I can copy this whole thing, put it into here, and grab out. Oh, there you go. Mine does have a question mark v4. Okay. So if I go to here, this is my GitHub avatar. So this is what I want to be able to pass into our function to make sure that it actually works. So uh, over here in Supabase, if I come back to this one where we were selecting our or calling our function to generate our OG image. So the first thing that we passed into that was our avatar URL. We then passed in our GitHub username. So let's say Dijon Musters. And then we passed in our content. So let's say go skateboarding. And again, we can put that question mark to make sure that our encode URI stuff is all working correctly. And now if I call this function, escape encode URI does not exist. Okay, that's because it's called escape URI encode, not escape encode URI. Okay, I got that around the wrong way. So if we come back to our functions and we have a look at our generate OG image function, and then down here, we're doing this, let's call the correct function, which is escape URI encode. And we confirm that. And then we come back to our SQL editor and run our function. And then you'll see we get back this big Cloudinary thing. And so we can just check whether this actually worked by copying this value and navigating directly to it. And it's working. We generated this OG image. And we can prove this is properly generated, not just the one that I went to before, by saying, and go skating and well, let's just say drink water. It's a good time to drink some water. And I will copy that URL, go off to Cloudinary. So you see that the first time that took a second to load from Cloudinary. But now after I drink some water, if I refresh this, it's like instantaneous. And so this is that caching that I was talking about before. Cloudinary does some very, very heavy caching. If this is an image that it's generated before, it doesn't want to go and do all that work again. And so, yeah. Cool. So now we just need to take this value or take this function, this generate OG image function, and we probably need to call it when we're creating a new matter. And so in Supabase or in Postgres, you have this concept of triggers. And so triggers are a way to subscribe to particular events that happen in your database and call a Postgres function when they occur. So you could subscribe to events like insert is what we're going to do. So we want to subscribe to the insert event on the matters table. And then when that event occurs, we want to go and call our generate OG image function and write that value to the column. Cool. So the way we do that is first we want to create a new function that's handling that logic. So if we come here to database and then functions, we want to create a new function, and this one can be handle new matter. The return type for this one is going to be trigger. So anytime you create a function that you want to call with a trigger, it has to return a trigger. We then have I've just noticed the connection might be bad as well. Yeah. Hopefully this isn't pausing and stuttering. Let me know if the connection isn't great and I can fix that up. But yeah, anyway, we need to return a trigger if we're going to call this Postgres function from a trigger. So we don't need any arguments. Right here we can say begin, end, and then in this trigger function, the first thing we need to do is, well, eventually what we want to do is we want to call our OG image function. So we want to call generate OG image, and we want to pass this function um, our our avatar URL, our GitHub username, and the content that we actually want to appear in that OG image. So we can get, we need to basically go and get our URL and our username for the user that's associated with this matter. Because remember, our matters table only contains our content, and then we have a user ID. But remember, this links to another table. So this links to our auth.users table. So if we want to go and look up this user in auth.users, which is what we'll need to do to, I can't scroll across, but what we'll need to do to be able to look up like their username and their avatar URL. Yeah, we need to do a lookup to another table rather than just, we don't have access to that information just on the row that's being inserted because we're just being passed the content. So we need to go and look up this value in another table so that we can call our generate OG function, generate OG image function. So I think we just got rid of our function that we were creating. So this is handle new matter. So this is a function we're going to call when we insert a new row into the matters table. The return type is going to be trigger. We then have a begin and an end. And since we're going to need to look up values in another table, we need to declare some variables to be able to store the return values of those. So we need our avatar URL, which is going to be text. And we need our GitHub username, which is also going to be text. And so then in here, we want to look up avatar, going to say URL and username from auth.users. And then we want to call our generate OG image function. Cool. So they're the two steps that we need to do in our function. So the first part is we want to basically we have our user ID. We just want to go and look up our avatar URL and our username from the auth.users table. But remember, they were inside that JSON-B object that we get back from GitHub. So basically, we want to say select, and then the name of that column was raw underscore user underscore meta underscore data. And then the way that we dig into a JSON-B column and pull out a particular value is we use these this arrow with an extra angled bit. All right, give me 1 second. All right, we use this dash and then 2 angled brackets, and then we tell it which column we would like to pull out the value from. So in this case, it'll be avatar URL. And then we want to also select raw user metadata and dig into the username, so user underscore name column. And then we want to take these 2 values and we want to store them in our declared variables here. So we can say into, so we want to select those values into avatar underscore URL. So that's this one. And then our GitHub username. And then we need to tell it where we actually want to select these values from. So we can say from auth.users, and then we also give it a where clause where the ID is equal to our user underscore ID column. Now we can't access this directly. When we create a function that's called by a trigger, we get access to this special new variable. So we can say new.userid. And so this will be equal to the user ID of that new row that's being inserted into the matters table. Cool. So we should now have our avatar URL and our GitHub username populated with those values. So now we just need to generate our OG image. So we can say generate OG image, and then that takes our avatar URL, our GitHub username, and our new dot content. So again, new is the new row being inserted into the matters table, and then content is the column within that row that we want to pass through to our generate OG image function. That then gives us back a string, which is our OG image that we actually want to store in our database. So we can say we want to set our new.og image column to be equal to what we get back from calling this function. And then we also need to return new. So anytime we have, again, a function that's going to be called by a trigger, we get access to that new variable. We can modify that however we want. We can change the values in columns. We can delete values in columns, whatever we want. But then at the end, we need to return new to say this is the new state of this object that we want, or this row that we want to write to the matters table. Cool. And again, if we come down here and show advanced settings, we want this to be PLPG and we want to set the type of security, again, to be security definer rather than security invoker. And now, if we create a new matter, this should all magically, this OG image should magically be generated for us. So let's test that out. If we come back to here, and we are currently signed in, so we say a new matter, and we submit this. We get matter is null because, yeah, we still need to implement that part of it. But if we go to our table editor and have a look at matters, we do not have an OG image, so everything failed. All right, so let's step through what happened here. So from our nice matter form, we don't actually, we don't need this anymore. So from matters, which is the name of our table, we want to insert content set to our matter, which should be what is in that thing. Well, yeah, I guess all of this is working because we still created our, of course, we created a function, but we never actually created the trigger to call this function. So if we come back over to functions, we've got this generate OG image function. Oh, sorry, we've got this handle new matter function, which is what we want to call anytime we insert a new matter, but we haven't actually created the trigger for it. So if we come across to triggers, create a new trigger, and we'll call this handle. Did I call the other one? No, on insert of matter. Anytime we insert a new matter into the matters table, so the table that we want to subscribe to is matters. The events that we want to subscribe to are insert. And then we want this to happen after the event. So after we've created the row, then we want to go and call this function. We want this to happen for every row. So the reason we do this is because we might have, we might do like multiple inserts in one statement. And if we had this set to statement, then this function would only run once for that whole collection of new values that had been inserted, which doesn't really make sense because we need to generate an OG image for every single row. So we set this to row. I don't know when you would set this to statement. I'm sure there are obviously use cases for it, but most of the time when you're doing this kind of thing, you want to set it to row. And then we want to choose the function that we want to call. So this is the handle new matter function. And we click confirm. And now, if we go back to this page, we come down to here and we say, and even, right, let's just say pool matter. We got matter is null, which is okay, so long as everything else worked. which it didn't. Okay, it's still broken. Damn, I thought we had solved it. Okay, well, we could dig through the logs and have a look at what happened here. So in our Postgres logs, uh, I haven't been checking the chat too much, but Anu is saying that anyway to hear what we lost at the beginning of the video due to lack of voice. Yeah, so I went through, I kind of like jumped back to the start and went through what I had implemented during that time. But yeah, let me know if that uh, isn't the case, and I can maybe, I don't know, re-record a version of the video again. Um, yeah, we'll see. But yeah, there shouldn't, everything that I went through, I think I re-went through when I got my audio back. But yeah, let me know if that's not the case. All right. So we don't have anything weird going on there. Our API logs here saying we're getting a 404. Yeah, that's when we're trying to select. So we'll have a look at that in a second. But it looks like our post went well. Cool. So I wonder what's happened. What? So we have our functions, so we have our triggers, and then on insert of matters, we called our handle new matter function. Our handle new matter function returns a trigger, and it goes off and selects raw metadata, avatar URL, and raw metadata there from auth.users where ID is equal to new.user ID. That seems right. New OG image is set to generate OG image. I guess one thing we could try is we could just set this to a new string and see whether that uh, actually writes to the database at all. So if we come back to our application and we say testing, and then we come to here and have a look, we have a new matter for testing, but OG image is still not being set. OG underscore image. What could be going wrong here? So we're calling our handle new matter function. If anyone in the chat can see the glaring mistake that I have made, please let me know. So declare avatar URL GitHub new OG underscore image is, I believe, the name of that. And then we're returning new. What if we simplify this even more? So what if we get rid of this stuff? And then we do this again. Hello. And come back here. Hello is there, but the OG image is not. It's very strange. I might just try deleting this trigger. Is this the right one? On insert matters. We'll just delete this one. Maybe we'll try stepping through that again. So if we have our functions and we've got our handle new matter, this doesn't need to take in any arguments. We declare that section, avatar URL, GitHub username. It is called OG image, right? I keep checking this, but OG underscore image, which is text. Well, let's just write a really simple function and say test matter, and this will return a trigger. And then we have our begin and our end. And then in here, we just want to set new.og underscore image to be testing. And then we want to return new. Unless I didn't scroll down and make this security definer. I may have forgotten to do that. Which shows you what happens if you forget to do that. This might all break and not work. So if we put this on the matters table for insert, we want this to happen after the event is fired for each row. And we want to call the test matter function. And now, if we go through this again, and we go working, and we submit that, come across to here, have a look at our table, our matters table, and our OG image is still empty. Very, very strange. Does anyone have any ideas? Maybe raise log. Yes, that's a good idea. Yes. Triggers. So maybe in my function, handle new matter or test new .og image equals that. Well, I am stumped. Okay. I actually raised an exception. This doesn't work, does it? Can I throw? No. Yell loudly. How do we raise in? Raise exception. Postgres. We can just raise. Well, yeah, we could check that this is actually running, right? By going before we do this, we could just say raise. And so now we should get an error in our logs after we try and create a new matter. So let's see. Okay, raise cannot, without parameters, cannot be used outside an exception handler. Well, at least we got good error messages. All right. Why would this not be working? Test matter, new.og image equals testing. All right. Well, maybe I can just recreate these functions directly in SQL. Let's try that. So let's get rid of our trigger on matter test. And our function for handle matter, handle new matter. And our function for this. Oops. Right. So, actually, I do have part of it written here, but we could say create or replace function. And the name of our function is going to be handle new matter. This is not going to take anything, and it's going to return a trigger. And then we can say as $, $, and we can say the language is PLPG SQL. And the security, I think we can just say security definer. The definer. And then in here, we can have a begin and an end. And I guess we could just do the simple version of this where we say OG image equals testing. Sorry, new dot OG image equals that. And then we want to return new. And we could actually just write all of this in the one place, couldn't we? So we could say, oh, how do we add a trigger? Maybe we'll just try creating this part. And then if we come across here and go to triggers, create a new trigger on new matter. It's going to be on the matters table on insert after the event fires for each row. And we want to call the handle new matter function, confirm. And now if we go through that process again, help, submit, get that, we come back here, and it's still not, so it's just not even, yeah, that's very, very strange. What's wrong with you, magic column? Why don't you accept values? It's definitely inserting a new value, and then, yeah, it's weird that I wouldn't have, if anything failed, yeah, it's like it's not even running. Hmm. Triggers on new matter, matters, handle new matter. I need Alistair to come back. This is why I run the happy hour streams with Alistair, because he always has an answer. Combining me and Alistair and Tyler together means that you just have an answer to literally any problem that you have. New.od image equals testing. Yeah, I'm not sure what's going on with this one. What if we try and copy? No, that won't work either. Very, very strange. I'm sure this is something very simple. And when watching this back later, I will be yelling at myself, not picking it up quickly. New.og image, and this is a matter. And setting it equal to that. And then just returning. Yeah. Okay, this doesn't make sense. Postgres doesn't make sense. It's all broken. All right. Well, the last bit of what I wanted to go through, I guess I can work out what's going on with this OG image stuff and then post about it later. But the other error that we're getting, actually, we're just gonna get errors all the way if we don't have an OG image. But we can look at something else that I wanted to cover, which is once we actually have a matter. So if we want to display the matters on the Matterday grid, which we're getting from here. So this is the call that we're making to Supabase. So we're calling Supabase.from matters with user. So this isn't actually a table that we have. So we'll look at that in a second. But we're selecting all of the columns. We're ordering by created at with ascending set to false. So basically just reverse chronological order, and then limiting to 1,000. Yeah, this part doesn't matter so much, but basically we are selecting from matters with user, we're selecting all the columns, and we're matching where status is equal to approved. So as I mentioned before, the grid of different matters that we display on the slash matters page uh, has all gone through an approval step. So it's gone through moderation. So uh, if we want to be able to do something like this, because we need access to not only the matter, but we need access to the GitHub URL and the avatar URL. Basically, we want some values from the auth.users table, and we want some values from the matters table. So we want to kind of create a query where we're selecting a collection of things and stitching them together. Now, from the client side of things, when we're using the Supabase JS client, this can't do queries across multiple schemas. So by default, this just has access to the public schema, and we can't actually reach across to the auth schema to get our users. So if we want to stitch those values together, we probably need to do it in Postgres and then expose it to our Supabase JS client in some way. Now we could write another Postgres function, and we could pipe these values through, and then we could use something called RPC in Supabase, which you should go and check out if you need to call a Postgres function from your client application. But since this is just kind of stitching together some values from one table and then doing a joining onto another table to grab values from another one, we can create something called a view, which allows us to kind of abstract away complex queries into a simple interface where we can kind of just treat it like a table where all of these values existed. And so that's what we're doing here with the matters with user. This is actually a view rather than a table. And that's another cool thing about views is that the Supabase JS library treats them exactly the same as tables. So we can select from this view, and if you're familiar with selecting data from tables in Supabase, you can select data from views in exactly the same way. So I'm going to leave this order and limit stuff here, and we're going to go and create this matters with user view. So I'm going to come across to our trusty SQL editor again, and we're going to create or replace a new view. This one's going to be called matters underscore with underscore user. And then we can say as, and this basically just wraps another query, like another select statement. So here we're saying we want to, basically we want to select everything, but only from the matters table. And then we just kind of want to append on our avatar URL and our username, our GitHub username. So we can say we'll go and get us everything from the matters table. And then we want to add on a couple of other columns. So we want to go and select raw underscore user underscore metadata. So remember that was that JSON-B column in our auth.users table. And again, we want to dig into our avatar URL field. And when we pull out this value, we don't want it to be to appear as a column called raw underscore user underscore metadata underscore data avatar URL. We probably want to alias that to something a little nicer. So we could just alias that to avatar underscore URL. And then we can do the same thing with our username. So we can say we also want to select our username. I think it's user underscore name. And we just want to display that as the column underscore, user name with no underscore. And then where do we actually want to select these from? So we want to select them from the matters table, or we might say public dot matters to be more specific. And then we can just alias this to matters. So we can refer to this as just the matters table. And then we want to do a left join for the auth.users table. And we can just alias this to users. So give us everything from the matters table, and then give us just these columns from the users table, where we're joining on matters.user ID, where that column is equal to our users.id. So go and get us everything from the matters table, and then go and look up where the user ID column matches our users. Yeah, go and get us everything from the matters table, and then go and look up from the auth.users table where that column user ID matches the ID of the user, and then pull out their avatar URL and their username. And so when we run this, well, actually, if we get rid of the view part of this, we could just run this select statement directly here, and we can see what we're going to get back. So you'll see we've got ID created at status, content, OG image, user ID, avatar URL, and then over here, oh, sorry, yeah, and then we've got avatar URL and username. So if we didn't do these aliases here, we can see what those not so nice columns would look like. So we've just got question mark, column, question mark, and our avatar. Oh, right, because we can only have one unnamed column. Yeah, so by giving them the aliases, we can say, well, this one is our avatar URL and this one is our username. But yeah, it's gone and got all of the matters and then appended on our avatar URL and our username. So we want to kind of save this this complex query. We don't want to keep writing this over and over again. So we want to store this in a view so we can reuse it whenever we need. And yeah, and so now we can just call matters with user and get back all of these matters with all of our users. Syntax error. Maybe this is because I can't actually put these on. Actually, no, that shouldn't be it, should it? Oh, no, that is it. Okay. Cool. So now we have a view. So now we could just say we want to select matters with user. Sorry, select. I know what I'm doing. Select star from matters with user. So you can treat this as a table, but it's this kind of this abstracted away version of a table in this view. But the cool thing is we can still treat this like this select statement. We can still treat the same as any other as if we were just selecting it from a regular table. So we could say we only actually care about like the status. So this column that's coming back from matters and maybe the username. We could just select these two columns and it just gives us back those two columns. We could also, if we have select star, we could chain on a where clause. We could say select star from matters where, and let's say status equals approved, which is something that we're doing in our code. And when we run this, we should get back no rows because none of them equal approved. They're all set to new. So yeah, so we can treat this view the same way as if this table existed in our code, in our database. And we can either select different columns or we can add on other joins or we can, yeah, do all kinds of complex things. But it really cleans up the logic here. Or even makes it possible. We wouldn't be able to do this by reaching across those two different schemas from Supabase JS without either abstracting that into a view or creating a function or something like that. So yeah, a very cool little trick. But now we have this view, so this page should actually work. So if we, it'll still break because we don't have any of the images. Sorry if you can hear that there. Fixing the deck just outside my office. So we're plagued with all kinds of technical problems for this stream. But if I say new matter, okay, this part works because this isn't actually an OG image. This is stitched together for this page. But if we tried to share this, this wouldn't actually work. And if we tried to have a look at the HTML and look at the OG image that's getting set, it wouldn't actually go to anywhere. It wouldn't, yeah, it wouldn't have been generated. It'd be set to null. So cool. But we can see that this is working. And now we could go to our matters page. No, is that not right? / matters. This should be loading up our matters, which should be our nice matters grid. But maybe it's right, yeah. It is, but they're all broken because they don't have OG images. Okay, but I reckon Daniel might be onto something here. He's saying you need to change it to before trigger rather than after trigger. And if you create a trigger that happens after an event, which looks like you did, then the row hasn't actually been updated, created, so you can't change it. Okay, it has already been updated, so you can't just right. So we can't change the OG image column. Well, this could be a very, very easy fix. So let's see if Daniel has solved all of the problems and gets a job at Supabase. Let's have a look. So I guess we can just yeah, we can recreate this from here. So we have our handle new matter. We deleted all of our other stuff, but yeah, I guess we can just test it with just our testing thing. So if we go to triggers and then our matters one, if we delete this, I think you might be right. I think you might be onto it. I reckon this is going to work. So now if I create a new trigger, um, and the name of this is going to be on matter insert, and we put it on the matters table for insert, and we do this before rather than after. And then for each row, then we call the handle new matter function and confirm. And now, if we come back to our application and we say it works, submit, this works properly, which looks good. And if we come across to our matters, we have testing. Nailed it. Nailed it, nailed it, nailed it. Thank you, Daniel. Excellent work. So we might actually be able to get this finished then, because now we just need to rewrite that function that we had, which was pretty simple because we had abstracted everything into our generate OG image function. So if we edit this function and um, we are just calling. Oh, actually, we did need to look up our username and uh, yeah, our username and avatar URL. But look at that, it's in my clipboard. Isn't that nice? Cool. Oops, not like that. Cool. So we're selecting our avatar URL and our username into avatar URL and GitHub username. So we need those. We need to declare those variables. So we can declare avatar URL as text, and we can declare our GitHub username as text. And then we're selecting avatar URL and username into those variables, getting that from the auth.users table where ID matches our new.user ID. And then we want to set our new.og image to be what we get back from generate OG image, which is the function we declared where we pass it our avatar URL, our GitHub username, and our new dot content. And we're returning new. Cool. And now it should actually still work because we still have our handle new matter function being called anytime we insert into the matters table. So if we come back to here, scroll all the way down and say this actually works. Maybe we'll put a question mark so we can test it all works. So we get this, which is good. If we go to our Supabase instance, come across to matters, we have actually works. It's set to our big, long, uh, awesome URL, which contains our stuff, hopefully. We can test that by just deleting everything else. Sorry if you can hear that hammering next door. Cool. So that actually works. So now we should be able to go to slash matters, and we no, still can't see that one. Anyway, if we go just back to our homepage and we create one more, and we submit, we can test that if we take our generated OG image URL from our new row here, copy this and paste it here, we should be able to see our nicely generated OG image, which is what would also be set for one more test. If we were to inspect this page now, and again, look at the HTML in the head under our big, scary OG image URL, that should be the same. So if we were to share this image, if this was actually hosted on Netlify, then we would be able to share that URL with someone else on Twitter or whatever, and we would be able to see that nice, big, lovely OG image. And I think that's actually everything that I wanted to go through. So I did well, I mean, I had significant help from Daniel and oh, look, Daniel, on top of it again, we don't have the approved status. This is why it wasn't I said this before. I said this many times, and yet it didn't even sink into my own brain that it's not going to display on the matters page if it hasn't been approved. So if we come to this matters page, of course it's not here because in Supabase, this is still set to the status of new. And if we want to set the status to approved and then come back to our application and refresh a couple of times, you can do it, computer. Oh, right, it was underneath. Cool. And there we have it. And then if we were to approve the other one as well, and then come back here and refresh, we can see both of those appear. And if we zoom out to a not weird viewport, then we can see that they appear nicely next to each other. Awesome. Sick. I think that was everything that I wanted to go through. Uh, yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel, for helping me out. That would have been a very um, sad ending if it had just been filled with errors and nothing actually work. Yeah, wouldn't have looked nearly as nice. So yeah, thanks heaps for helping me out. But that's how you build a uh, a Supabase backend that does all this crazy, interesting automated stuff. So the cool thing is that we've been able to keep our application logic really simple. Like all we need to do, if I come back over here and look at when we're inserting in a new matter, we can keep this super simple where we're just saying, go and insert a new row into the matters table, and here's the content for it. And then Supabase is able to take that and go and do all of this other automated stuff. So it's able to go and generate that Cloudinary URL. It's using our V8 function for encoding the URI and escaping it. And it's using, yeah, it's doing all of that stuff behind the scenes. But our user doesn't need to know about that. And our developers working on the application don't need to know about that. They can just say, well, I need to insert a new value into the table. Here's the value. And then everything else just magically happens. So yeah, hopefully you got something out of this. Hopefully you got something out of me struggling through debugging issues as well, and seeing what it's really like to build applications. Uh, and sorry for the first like 10 minutes of the stream that didn't have audio. Hopefully you enjoyed my lovely miming of the different things that we needed to do, and hopefully just stitched together, everything that I was doing on the screen anyway. But yeah, thanks for joining me. I will probably edit this and fix up those things, and then none of this stuff that I'm saying now will make sense because there won't be 20 minutes of silence at the start. But yeah, thanks for joining me. Enjoy the rest of your day. I am going to play out the video that is not for this stream again, and yeah, thanks for joining me. See ya.